There's a famous quote that goes something like, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on solving that problem, then I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes figuring out a solution to that problem. And that quote is attributed to Albert Einstein, though there's debate about that. But the quote itself holds true, that if there is a problem and it's a very complicated problem, a lot of people will try to jump the gun and go into trying to suggest solutions to what could be the solution to the problem, or try to figure the problem out. But the approach that this quote is asking us to take is to define the problem, to get really clear on what the issues actually are. Because when we know what the issues actually are, we can find a solution for it. A solution exists. The problem is that we don't do the work and take the time to actually define the elements of the problem. And we aren't able to see the individual nodes of that problem that need to be solved. So we see this as this one jumbled mess, which is much harder to decode. So when it comes to something like growing a dental office, the problem of how do we get more patients, if I asked you, you have a problem, you need to get more patients, how would you solve it? There's a million different answers. But if we narrow down the problem and we define it and say we aren't getting word of mouth because people aren't aligned with our services, because in this area we only provide services to, etc., then you have concrete areas that you can define and immediately work on. And so when we go into a lot of these strategy sessions or consultations with clients and they have an issue, most of the consultation is just breaking down the problem to figuring out what it is exactly that's going on. And the solution is right there. The solution is something that they could have figured out. But of course, the hard part is understanding how to break down that question. And I think it's important as leaders or as business owners to understand that most of this work, the work of asking questions and figuring out and defining the problem, is the work of strategy. That is the high level activities that we have to be engaged with most of the time. And the actual work of the solutions and implementing the solutions are more lower level things that we can easily outsource and find people to do on our behalfs. If you look into, like, let's say military wise, the generals aren't on the front of the line because they're reserved for thinking at the strategy level. They're taking in inputs on what the situation is, they're understanding different scenarios, and what they're doing is they're getting very clear about what the problem is. So more than the frontline troops, they have a higher level understanding of exactly what the situation is and what the problem is, and therefore they're able to mobilize units and so on in order to effectively solve the problem. And that's the approach that I want us to take, not necessarily in a military context, but in a way that of understanding at a high level what the issues are, what the problems are, developing our skills of being able to break down those problems into concrete nodes that you can individually look at and find a solution for, because that is the essence of all problem solving. That problems are situations that can be resolved. All right. So hope this video is helpful. Hope that changes your mindset on how to approach problems, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.